Hey guys, Ted McGrath. So I want to do a give you the structure, but I'm going to tell you what's senior to the structure is the art form. So today I'm going to go into the basic structure, and then I'm going to go into the art form of how you actually use the structure so it can be fun. Because let's face it, when you're presenting with a structure, it's extremely boring. Nobody's really interested. And if you're saying anything beyond 3 steps in a structure, people just tune out, right? So ultimately, the basic structure of presenting is, here's what I'm going to talk about today. Here's the problem that most people face. Boom, get into a story, okay? And then teach little pieces of content, share another story, teach pieces of content, share another story, and close. And then at the end of your presentation, when you're going to close, always close with a story if you want to sell something, and then close again. Okay? I do this in seminars, and every seminar that I do where I sell something, I always tell a personal story at the end. And there's a story that I tell that I'm not going to tell tonight for the sake of time, but I tell a story about my grandparents. And it's a very personal story. And so many times when people are doing storytelling, they ask the question of like, well, how do I make sure that the story is relevant to my product? But the truth is, the story has whatever meaning you want it to have to you. So you could tell any story. Like I tell a story about giving the send-off speech at my my grandmother's funeral, and I tell this from the stage, and I tell it at the end of my pitch, and it's a very personal story to me. It's very real. It's one of the most proud presentations I've ever done, where I give the send-off speech at my actual grandma's funeral, and people were crying and they were laughing, and I tell that at the end of my pitch when I'm in a seminar. And when I'm doing it at the end of my pitch, it's very personal to me, but I weave in a message of what it actually means to the audience. And to me, when I'm telling that story about my grandmother passing away, it's more of like a lost story. Because when you're presenting, there's always a group or a segment of the audience that's worried about losing something, or they're worried about getting to the end of their life, and they're concerned that they're going to get to meet David, and when David first started with me, he was making $200,000 and we scaled him up to $4 million. What a great story. Yay. Like, nobody wants to hear that story, man. Like, people don't want to hear stories. They don't want to hear event telling, right? The worst kind of story is like, yeah, so when I was 6 years old, this happened, and then I grew up, and then I found my purpose, and then I made a whole bunch of money, and life was great, and so, great, now I'm going to get into the presentation. Nobody wants to hear event telling and story. Nobody, okay? It's boring, and that's not a story, okay? People want to hear a story, right? How do I know this? I mean, I performed my own personal story. It's a 65-minute play that I do. I play 12 characters from the stage. I get up there, I play all these different characters. It's on my life story, and for 65 minutes, I tell a story. Now, if I were to sell something at the end of that, I could get every single person in that room standing up to go buy something. And I have sold something before at the end of that presentation. But it's a play that I do. It's called Good Enough. It's on my life story of not feeling good enough and then chasing my dreams. And I talk about my overdose from drugs and alcohol. I talk about all my ridiculous life experiences that are funny, dramatic, sad. I tell everything about my life. And I make it funny and I make it entertaining. And it's fun. And the audience is highly engaged and entertained. So one of the rules of storytelling is you have to have fun. One of my mentors, when I first wrote my play, 12, 13 years ago, he said, take delight in telling your story. So if you don't take delight in telling your story, if you don't have fun every time you tell your story, like it's a new unit of time and like you've never done it before, then you're not going to be excited about it and your audience is going to be excited about it. So I always learned that from my original mentor. Is like, take delight in telling your story and have fun in telling your story. So somebody who's having fun in telling their story is engaging. And if you're engaging, you're going to uplift your audience. So if you have fun telling your story, you're going to uplift your audience. People who are uplifted will end up buying more as well. So if you're going to lead seminars, clearly you want to sell something at the end. Now, when I do my play, I don't sell anything at the end. It's just the joy of storytelling, okay? But I've been able to tie all kinds of different stories into my presentation. So at the end, I can sell a product while entertaining and educating the audience. So number one, always take delight in telling the story as if it's the first time. Number two, when you do a presentation, you shouldn't just have one story about yourself. You should have multiple stories. You should have a personal story. You should have client stories. You should have a story about loss, because there's a whole group in the audience that, like, if you don't tell a story about loss, like, they're down in loss. They're kind of like in apathy, and they're hoping something could change my life, and you got to pull them up the ladder, man, of being like down on the bottom rung. And if you tell a story that relates to them being in apathy or in loss, and you tell a story about loss, and then you bring them up the ladder to hope, joy, possibility, all of a sudden you can get the whole room, even people that are kind of hopeless in the room, right? Then you have the high achievers, right, where you just tell a story to the high achievers and they're excited and they want to take action right away. But that's 10% of the audience. 10% is the high achieving action takers. How do you get 50% of the people to stand up? My last event that I did, it was probably 60-70% of the room stood up to grab envelopes for a very, very high ticket offer. And most of what I did from the stage was tell stories. So the storytelling, the pitch, right? Because people want to know, how do you pitch, right? But most of the pitch is actually done properly by good stories. And if you don't have good stories, then you can get up there and you can follow the process of like, great, okay, I'm going to teach a little bit to somebody. I'm going to then I'm going to talk about my investment. I'm going to give the high value of my investment. I'm going to cross out the price. I'm going to tell them today's only special pricing, right? I'm going to give them a call to action. I'm going to handle the objections that the audience has. As I handle those objections, I'm going to come back. I'm going to make the call to action again. I'm going to handle the objections again. I'm going to come back and I'm going to make the call to action. That's process selling, right? And it works. You should have some process in your selling, right? I just gave you some gold on that one, right? So process selling is knowing the process of sales, right? I'll just give it to you real fast, right? When you get into the pitch, right? You have the content, you have the presentation portion of it, you have the storytelling portion of it, which you weave in and out, but then you have the pitch. And the pitch, you don't make a pitch without doing contrast pricing. You just don't, okay? Why, right? Now, you shouldn't sit up there like a used car salesman, right? And sit there and go, okay, the price of this program is $64,973.82. And today only, you're going to get it for $14,000. You shouldn't do that, right? Okay? All right, God knows I've made those mistakes earlier in my career, and I probably did some shit like that, okay? You shouldn't do that. What you do with a pitch is you tell people the value of what you're offering up, right? So I don't have to tell you that this thing's $100,000 today. I can tell you the value is $100,000, and I can tell you why it's worth $100,000. But I'm not telling you that the price is $100,000 because it's not, right? Unless I'm selling something that's $100,000, okay? And I've sold stuff. I've sold many $100,000 packages from the stage. I've even sold $200,000 packages from the stage. So I know how to sell them, okay? Okay. So when I'm pitching something though that is maybe $30,000, I'm going to talk about the value being $100,000, and I'm going to make a case for everybody in that room why the value is worth $100,000. Even if you're brand new, here's why this is worth $100,000. And I'm going to talk about the cost of inaction, of the cost of when I didn't hire a coach to do this, and when I traveled around the country searching for solutions for a year and a half, and I spent money on advertising, and I spent money on leading seminars, and none of it worked, and I bombed from the stage, and it just didn't work until I figured the secret formula, right? So you build value, and you say, this is the value, and this is the value because I made so many damn mistakes along the way, and I lost so much damn money along the way, which is true, man. Like anybody who's ever built something of high magnitude lost a shitload of money, man. So when you're presenting to an audience, tell them that. Does this make sense? You tell them, here's the value of my program, right? And then you tell them the cost. So even if you're brand new going on this venture, it's going to cost you a fortune to do this. And because you're going to make all these mistakes. Okay? I remember when I was 22 years old, right? I was like, my boss is like, I was in the life insurance business. My boss is like, who in the room wants to do seminars? I'm like, I'll do them. I'll do the seminars. I was like green enough and young enough and dumb enough to do them, right? And so I was practicing for the seminar, right? And at 22 years old, you don't know shit, right? So all I could do is memorize the script to the seminar, right? Because I'm 22, I'm in the finance business. What do I know? I look like I'm 14, right? So all I could do was memorize the script to this presentation that I had to give, right? And it was like my third time giving the presentation, and I was slotted to go give this presentation to like a CPA firm, like 10 people who are CPAs sitting around this table. And I remember walking into this room, and there's 10 CPAs sitting there, right? And they got like pocket protectors coming out of their pockets, man. Number 2 pencils falling out of their ass, man. I'm like 21 years old. They're like 60 years old. I'm like, this is going to be a tough one to win, right? So I walk up on stage and I start delivering the talk. And like 2 minutes into the talk, I forget my lines. I mean, I go completely blank, right? And I'm not talking any kind of blank. I'm talking like sheet white blank, man. It's like I'm on freaking LSD blank, right? And all of a sudden, 2 beads of sweat start coming down my forehead, right? And then it starts seeping out of my shirt, like sweat everywhere. And I've got this light blue shirt on with no undershirt, and I take off my jacket, and my shirt is waterlogged in freaking sweat. And then I do something never, ever, ever done before in the history of speaking, right? I decide I'm going to take a seat in the front row with the CPAs, and we are watching nobody on the freaking stage, man. Okay? And I sat there for like 30 seconds, maybe a minute. It seemed like an eternity. And then I got back up in my soaking wet shirt, and I delivered the talk, and I delivered the worst talk ever, period, ever, period, ever, period, in the history of freaking speaking, right? And I thought I would never get back up on that stage, ever again. In fact, I was like, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm 22. I'm never going to speak again. Of course, like 5 to 7 days later, after I faked being sick, because I was pretending like I was sick in the head, right? So like 5 to 7 days later, I was like, okay, I got to redeem myself. I got to get back up on the stage. So I set a seminar for like 2 months from that date. I told my brother, I told my boss, I'm like, get that group of CPA accountants at that talk. And I said, I'm going to nail that talk. So 2 months later, I got back up there. I delivered the talk again. I nailed the talk. We made like 40 or 50 grand at 22 years old. That's a lot of money, right? And I was like, boom, my speaking career is back. So what I learned from that is a couple things, right? Number one, tell a good story, right? You got to be able to tell stories, because I was getting up there 22. I had a script memorized. I would say in the world of speaking, don't ever memorize your script. The only script I've ever memorized since is my play. I do a one-man play. I know every single damn word in that script. It's 65 minutes long. There's no intermission. There's no break. And for 65 minutes, I play 12 characters on stage, and I know every piece of that script. I could recite it right now. It's the only script I memorized because it's a play. But in the world of speaking, I don't have a script. Do I have a structure I follow? Yes. But I use the structure to create an art form for myself. The structure frees me up. Even the script of my play, because it's structured, it frees me up because I know it so well to explore and to do different things. All right? So, the 3 takeaways I'm going to give you on this, okay? Number 1, you got to figure out what is the story that you want to tell from the stage. All right? And so many times when I say, hey, figure out a story, somebody will say to me like, Ted, my story has no relation whatsoever to my product or service. Like, why would I tell the story? I'm like, no. Your story has the meaning you give it, right? So I'll tell the story about passing out on stage to an audience. I'll tell a story about overdosing from drugs and alcohol to an audience. I'll tell a story about my grandmother, passing away and me giving off the send-off speech. And it's like this amazing story, right? It doesn't sound great, but it's an amazing story. I'll tell all kinds of stories. I'll tell crazy stories about clients. I have all these stories that I tell. And so some of them, they don't even appear to relate to the product that I'm selling at all. But I have a specific meaning of what it means to me. And then I tie the thread of the meaning of the story to the product or service that I'm selling. Does this make sense? So story, pick a story. What does the story mean to you? And tie the meaning to your product or service. You come up with anything. Like if you're just joining us earlier on, like I literally have a specific meaning in the send-off speech that I personally gave at my grandma's funeral. And there's a specific meaning that it has for me personally. And then I tie it to the future of the audience's life, and I give meaning to them on it, whatever it's going to mean to them, right? So you can always find meaning in a story, and you can always tie that story to what you think your audience wants. Okay? Second thing is, tell stories to break up the content. All right? So, like, if you're going to give a presentation from the stage that say is 60 minutes long, like if you're going to sell something like that's $2,000, you probably need about 60 minutes on a webinar. You need 60 minutes from a stage to sell something $2,000, right? If you're going to sell something that's $30,000 from the stage or $100,000 from the stage, you need to have the audience for a couple days. Okay? When I sell a 100K package, I have an audience there for at least 3 days. And on the second day in the afternoon, I pitched 100K. When I have a 30K offer, I do an audience for at least 3 days, and I'll pitch the offer the morning before lunch on the second day. Okay? So I always know, like with my offers, I'm not going to sell a $30,000 offer in an hour talk. If I have 3 days with an audience, I'm going to pitch it, right? If I'm doing a virtual seminar online, like during COVID, we cleaned up, man. We were just doing virtual seminars all the time, like 3-day virtual seminars. And then I would pitch on day 2 and pitch on day 3. And the other thing is, if you're going to lead a seminar, I always I spent all this dough, $15,000 on books. And then I ended up throwing every damn one of those books out at the end. But I spent $15,000 on books. So like if I'm talking to people about making a $30,000 investment and I spent 15 grand on books that I did nothing with, and I figured out how to recoup that investment, which was a huge mistake, the audience is listening and going, wow, this guy spent $15,000 on books. He did nothing with it. I can invest $30,000 in an incredible program. So I have a money story all the time. Okay, when I'm leading a seminar, always have a money story. So you want to have a personal story, you want to have a money story, you want to have a story of loss, and you want to have client stories. Okay, and what is the basic structure of a story? Like, okay, it's the art of storytelling. When I tell a story, I get into it, but there's a basic, simple structure, right? One, what's the moment of loss? Right? And so he's in the audience, and I make an offer. And so like just in a moment, I'm going to make an offer to all of you, and I'm going to hold up an envelope, and whoever wants this offer, I'm going to have you stand up and grab the envelope so you're standing for your dreams and your future. So I'm doing this in the room with David, and I make the offer, and he's one of the first ones up, and he grabs the envelope. Him and his fiance, or him and his wife, or him and his girlfriend, right? And they grab the envelope. And then they request a meeting with me. They're like, we so want to meet with Ted. We're going to do this thing, right? So I'm like, great. I sit down a few hours later and I meet with David and I meet with Kathleen. And we're sitting there having a conversation. I'm like, great. Sounds like you're interested in doing this. I said at the time my offer was $100,000. I'm not going to offer that to you today, but when I made the offer to David, it was $100,000, right? And I'm sitting down. I'm like, great. So you ready to do this thing? He's like, yes, we're ready to do this thing. I'm like, great. How are you going to pay for this thing? And he goes, man, we don't have the money. And I'm like, oh. So like, what inspired you to actually show up and stand up? Like you stood up and grabbed the envelope. You were like one of the first ones to pop. Like what inspired you to stand up and grab the envelope? He's like, we just know we have to do this. And his girlfriend at the time, she's like, we know we have to do this. We know we have to do this. And I'm like, great. So let me just kind of take you through the money conversation here. So like, you got any money in savings or checking? It's like, no, like barely anything, like $1,000. I'm like, great. So your income at your job, what are you making? You making like 100,000, 200,000 a year? I make $200,000 a year. Great. So you make 200 grand in your chiropractic office. Like, you put any of that money away? Nah, I've never invested. I just kind of spend it. Okay. You ever put it in any stocks or anything? Mutual funds? No. No stocks, no mutual funds. How about any credit cards? You got any credit cards? Like credit cards you would put this on? No, I don't have any credit cards. My credit's bad, actually. Okay, I got it. How about like a retirement plan? Like a 401k plan? Like, you ever got like a 401k plan, like an IRA? You ever heard of that stuff where you put it away and like you touch it when you're 59 and a half? Nah, I've never done any of that stuff. Like, any gold? You got any gold or silver or anything like that? No gold, no silver. Like, like anything, like a rainy day fund, an emergency fund, any money under the sun that exists anywhere. He goes, well, you know what? I'll tell you, Ted. My mom just passed away like 6 months ago, and she left me $100,000 for a rainy day fund. So I look at him across the table. I look at him. I'm like, dude, looks like it's raining a little bit. What do you think, huh? And so we found the $100,000 for him to invest in the program, right? So now I'm telling this story, right? I'm coming out of the story for a second, but I'm telling this story to an audience. A whole room full of people, right? And I'm telling them the story, and they're listening to the story. And what I'm doing when I'm telling that story is, one, I think it's a great story, but two, and it's entertaining, and three, I'm telling them a story and I'm going through the money conversation in the room. So when I'm making the pitch to my audience, I'm telling them the conversation I had with David. I'm taking them through their checking account, their credit cards, their savings, all that stuff to get them thinking of where they would get the money to invest in the program I'm about to pitch. So I'm handling the money objection through a story. So the story goes on, right? Because I want to tell people the outcome. I'm like, so David invests in the training, and we sit down for our first meeting, and I'm like, so tell me more about what you do, right? And so he starts telling me, and it's like literally like UFOs are like flying above his head. I'm like, this is the most confusing message I've ever heard in my entire freaking life, right? I'm like, dude, how do any of your clients actually understand what you're saying? Right? So he goes, no, it's just my chiropractic stuff. I go, yeah, but you don't use industry jargon to tell people what you do. You got to make it simple. So I'm like, okay, bro, like when you explain chiropractic, it's like UFOs are flying into outer space. Nobody's gonna understand what you do, dude. So let me ask you a few simple questions, right? Number one, who do you want to work with? He's like, well, just anyone. I'm like, who do you want to work with? He goes, okay, I want to work with men. I'm like, great, pick an age. He's like, well, maybe 40, 50, 60. I'm like, pick an age, dude. He's like 45. I'm like, great. So he says 45. And I go, great. What are the 3 outcomes that men are going to get when you work on them from a chiropractic standpoint? process. And through engaging, fun, entertaining stories where people are laughing and they're like, oh, I got that same problem with my message. I got that same problem. They're having fun. And at the same time, I'm handling their money objections that I'm selling. And at the end of the day, like, they know they're being sold because I'm very overt. And the other thing, when you sell, be overt. Don't hide what you're doing. I tell people at the beginning of the talk when I'm going to sell, literally, when I'm doing this in a seminar room, great. So this talk right here, I'm going to make an offer to you. And I said, so I'm going to teach you some content today. I'm going to tell you some stories, and I'm going to make an offer to you. And pretty soon, in about an hour, I got some envelopes here, and I'm going to hold them up, and I'm going to ask you to stand up for yourself if you want this. So I'm going to get into the presentation. Here's what I'm going to talk about right now. And I literally tell them this when I'm doing a seminar, and I've been with them already for a couple days. I tell them that overt. But even on the first day of leading a seminar, I let them know, hey, I'm really glad that you're here. I said, and the first thing I do at a seminar is I have people raise their hand and tell me what they want to get out of the weekend. I don't want to start off a presentation when I'm with people and just start talking. When I'm physically with them, I'm like, what do you want to get out of this? Tell me. And I start getting in communication with my audience one by one by one, and I'm in communication. And the number one thing when you're speaking, particularly when you're doing this in a room, because it's very hard on a webinar, but you can get people saying stuff in the chat box, right? But when you're in a seminar room, physically, ask people, what do you want to get out of the weekend? Get in communication with them. And as you get in communication with them, it'll be so much easier to communicate over 3 days. The reason somebody doesn't think they can lead a seminar for a day or 90 minutes or even 3 days, the reason somebody doesn't think they can do it is they don't think they can communicate. Dude, nobody, okay? Not even an engineer with a bow tie stuck up his ass. And I love engineers because they're smart, okay? They don't want to watch a PowerPoint either, okay? They might want a visual there and have the visual so that they have a mass on what you're talking about, but they want to be engaged in the communication by you. They don't want a fucking via, man. They don't want you to take a via. A via is, it would be like if I was talking to you right now, I'm gonna look at my text message, take it off the text message and talk back to you. Like, how messed up would that be, right? I'm gonna look at a PowerPoint and like click on the thing and then take it off the PowerPoint and give it back to you. Like, come on, dude, who does that? Who does that, right? And if you do that, stop doing that, right? If you wanna speak, if you wanna get into the art of speaking, the only reason I ever use a PowerPoint is for the audience to have a visual mass on what I'm talking about. So if I'm talking about a funnel in marketing, I have the picture of the funnel up there so they can have the mass of it. But I don't use it to communicate. You see what I'm saying? I don't use it to help me communicate my words. I use it so the audience can see the thing that I'm talking about. Not putting up some words on the PowerPoint so the audience can be reading the PowerPoint with me while I'm reading the PowerPoint. Like, no, dude, no. Nobody wants to watch that. Nobody, okay? So the art of presentation is know your shit, man, know your content. And all you got to do in a presentation is know the 3 things you want to talk about. Know the 3 stories you want to tell. And then when you want to close, know that there are 4 or 5 different objections that you got to handle in the room. But wouldn't it be cool if you were going to close and you had a money objection story, man? Like sometimes people get afraid of sales, right? I mean, it's the most exhilarating, fun thing in the world. If you haven't gotten up in front of an audience and literally controlled an audience, and when I use control, I use it in the best sense of the word. Good communication is good control, man. Okay, I'm not talking about let me NLP you and try and go into your subconscious. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm overt. I tell you I'm going to sell you. I tell you I want to help you. And then I tell you stories and entertain you and I sell you. And I keep making calls to action to sell you. That's what I do. Okay? And it's fun. And so if you haven't had the fun experience of being in a room to communicate to an audience, to tell stories and make an offer, and then watch nobody stand or watch a few people stand, I'll tell you a quick thing, okay? Brandon Hawk was a pastor that I trained to speak from the stage, okay? Went on to do $1 million in about 18 months, right? And so Brandon had never sold anything in his life before he met me. Never a thing. And so he was at one of my seminars. He stood up, he took my big package for, teaching speakers, right? And so he was like one of the first ones to stand up and grab the envelope, right? So he came on, he worked with me. And so I said, great. So like, dude, for the price point that you invested, I will come to your first seminar and I will actually help you. And I'm going to structure your talk and I'm going to structure your pitch and I'm going to drill you on it and I'm going to train you to do it. He goes, but Ted, he goes, when I make the offer and I tell somebody to stand up and grab the envelope if they want it, what if nobody stands up, right? Because what if nobody stands up? I go, dude, present, and he was already a good speaker because he was a pastor, right? So he had some skills. He got even better at telling stories, number 2. But number 3, he'd learned the art of telling stories and handling objections. And it didn't go like, hey, here's the first envelope and everybody popped afterwards. He made the first call to action, somebody stood up, told a story, more people stood up, told another story, more people stood up. So when you're making a pitch, you make the first call to action. You told stories before that call to action, so people should be ready to pop, right? I don't think I've had one time where nobody stood up in an offer, and I'll tell you that in a second. So they should be ready to pop. So normally you'll get some people to pop. My last event, I did so damn well up to the pitch that I kid you not, in a room full of 100 people, 70% of the room stood. 70% of the room stood for the offer. We didn't have enough. We had people running around. I couldn't hand out all the envelopes. The whole room just popped like popcorn. It was amazing, right? And I knew that I had done such a good job at telling the stories and getting people excited. By the time the first offer came, they popped. So if you do good stories, you'll always get somebody to pop up. I've never seen it with anybody I haven't trained where they haven't gotten at least somebody to pop up. Then to move the rest of the audience, you got to tell even more stories and you'll get more to pop. And then you got to tell another story to get more to pop. And then you got to do last calls, because last calls will get people to pop. And then what I like to do for my final story, I let people know, thank you very much. We're going to go to lunch in just a moment. Thanks for being such a great audience. Thanks for sitting through this. I know for some of you it got uncomfortable. For some of you it was fun. For some of you things come up with selling and money. Thank you for being here. Whether you stood up and grabbed an envelope or not, I respect all of you for being here. But I want to just tell you one last story that's just personal to me, and then we'll just go to lunch. And then I drop in. And everybody relaxed. Well, most people stood up, half the room, but the 50% that didn't stand up, like they're feeling a little bit like, hey, I didn't do anything or whatever. I might have been thinking about it. So then they just relax. Oh, okay, good, it's over, right? And then I tell a story. And every time I tell that story, the last story, I go to tears every time. Okay? The audience goes to tears. And then everybody starts laughing. And it's an amazing, amazing, most personal story of my life. It's an amazing story. And then at the end of that story, I make one final call to action. And normally the final call to action, somebody pops. There's like a couple people that are left that pop. I don't know if they're ever going to buy or whatever, but I just do it, give them a last chance. And that's how I do the pitch. I have fun. It's exhilarating. It should be one of the most fun things you do because it's a game. And if you haven't gotten to a place where you made speaking a game and you made it an entertaining event, where it's entertainment more so than it's speaking, where it's storytelling about life more so than it's business. If you haven't done that yet, I highly encourage you to go down that path. It'll be one of the most rewarding things that you do, because at the end of the day, you can get caught up in business and thinking about what you're going to say in your marketing funnel, or what you're going to say in your content, or what you're going to say on your sales page. But at the end of the day, it's all just a communication. And if you get good at presenting, I promise you know how to write copy on a sales page. If you get good at presenting and you can pitch from the stage, I promise you'll know how to do a sales video online. It is not hard. Okay. And if you get good at presenting and storytelling, I'll promise you'll know how to write ads, because you'll know how to communicate. All an ad is a communication. People think there's some secret formula to an ad. It's a communication. How would I communicate to this customer right now? What problem are they going through? How do I talk to them in a way where I can identify with the problem they're facing every morning when they wake up? How do I get into that and speak to them? That's all it is. Okay. So don't overthink the process. There isn't some magic formula, guys. Is there? I think the magic formula, if there is like a way to put something together in a formula, like way, if there is one, I would say it's more of an art form than anything. That's what it is. And if you can use a structure that frees you up to deliver your art form, then you can win. But if you get boxed into somebody else's structure and you just got to do it like their structure, you become them. You don't want to be them. You want to be you. help on. I'll create more content videos like this to serve you. It's a passion of mine. Speaking, I've been speaking. My first professional speech was when I was 22 years old in front of an audience. My third one you already heard. I passed out on stage, broke into sweats. That didn't go so well, okay? So there will be others if you've ever bombed before. Trust me, okay? All right, I hope this serves. You guys are amazing. I'll see you soon, and thanks for watching.